My mother didn't ruin my relationships in the normal way, like being overprotective or weirdly judgmental. No, she flirted, she competed, and she did it with the calm confidence of someone who thinks the world is her stage and everyone else is just props. I'm Lila, 25, living in Columbus, Ohio, working as a project coordinator for a small construction firm. Normal life, normal apartment, normal goals. The only abnormal thing was the woman who raised me, Mary Ann, who treated my dating life like a personal insult. It started when I was 19, which is the exact age you're old enough to realize something is messed up, but still young enough to keep hoping it'll magically stop. The first boyfriend she targeted was a guy named Noah. Sweet, quiet, a little awkward. The kind of guy who'd carry groceries without being asked. I brought him to dinner, and my mom came downstairs wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Tight, shiny, and absolutely not casual pasta night. Noah stood up to shake her hand. She didn't shake it. She held it. Too long. "Oh, wow," she said, looking him up and down like he was a car she might lease. "Lila, you didn't tell me you were dating this." Noah laughed like he thought it was a joke. I remember wanting to crawl under the table. During dinner, she asked him questions that weren't even about him. They were about how he'd treat a woman. "So," she said, swirling her wine, "are you the type who gives massages? I mean real ones. Strong hands, you know?" I kicked her under the table so hard my toe hurt. She smiled at me like I was adorable. After that night, Noah started pulling away. It took 2 weeks for him to finally say it. We were sitting in my car outside his apartment. He stared at the steering wheel like it had answers. "I think your mom hates you," he blurted. "What?" He swallowed. "I think she wants attention from me, and it makes me feel gross, and I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't want to be around that." I tried to laugh it off. I did the whole "she's just like that" routine, the same line women use about men who just have a temper. Noah's face didn't change. "I'm sorry," he said, and that was that. Micro hook. I told myself it was a one-time thing. It was not. By 21, I developed a system. Don't bring anyone home, don't mention anyone's name, and if my mom asked, lie. It wasn't even because I was ashamed. It was because she treated my life like a reality show, and she was always auditioning to be the main character. The problem with systems is that they collapse the second you meet someone you actually like. That person was Ethan. Ethan was the good guy everyone talks about like he's a myth. He taught 8th grade science. He laughed at my dumb jokes and remembered my coffee order after hearing it once. We dated for 4 months before I introduced him to my mom, and I only did it because he kept saying, "I want to understand your world." He didn't realize my world included a glitter bomb with a personality disorder. The dinner started fine. Too fine. My mom was on her best behavior, which should have been a warning flare. She was charming, warm. She complimented Ethan's job, asked about his students, even laughed at my stories instead of twisting them into something humiliating. Then, after dessert, when Ethan went to wash his hands, she leaned toward me with this fake, innocent smile. "He's adorable," she whispered. "You sure you can handle a man like that?" I stared at her. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said lightly, "men like that need a woman who appreciates them, a woman who doesn't take them for granted." The air felt colder. Ethan came back, and my mom switched right back into friendly mom mode like she hadn't just tried to plant a knife between my ribs. 2 days later, Ethan texted me, "Did your mom add me on Instagram?" I replied, "Probably, ignore it." He sent a screenshot. She'd followed him, liked 6 photos, and commented a heart under one where he was holding his niece. My stomach dropped. I called her immediately. "Why are you commenting hearts on my boyfriend's page?" She sounded offended like I'd accused her of a felony. "It's a heart, Lila. Do you want me to be rude? You don't need to be on his page at all." "I'm allowed to be friendly," she snapped. "God, you're so insecure." Micro hook. The next thing she did wasn't public. It was private, and it was deliberate. Ethan didn't tell me right away. He tried to handle it. He didn't want to start drama. That's what kind people do. They try to be mature around someone who's committed to chaos. A week after that dinner, he came over with this tight expression on his face, like he'd been holding in a thought for too long. Can I ask you something without you getting mad? He said. I don't love that setup, but sure. He held up his phone. Your mom messaged me. My throat went dry. What did she say? He hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. The message thread was short, which somehow made it worse. Mom. Hey, Ethan. Just wanted to say it was so nice meeting you. You have such a calming energy. Mom. Lila's lucky. Some women don't recognize what they have until it's gone. Mom. Anyway, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. I stared at it until the words blurred. That's weird, I managed. Ethan exhaled. Yeah, and then she sent another one at like midnight. He scrolled. Mom. Couldn't sleep, just thinking about how different people can be behind closed doors. Hope you're okay. I felt heat climb my neck. Oh my God. I didn't respond, he said quickly. I blocked her. I needed you to see it. I wanted to scream, but instead I did that thing where you laugh because reality is too embarrassing to process. She's doing it again, I whispered. Ethan's eyebrows pulled together. Again? I told him the short version. Noah, the dress, the comments, the hand-holding like a hostage situation. Ethan looked horrified, but there was also this tiredness in his eyes, like he'd already made a decision and he just wanted confirmation he wasn't crazy. I really like you, he said, but I can't date someone whose parent is inserting herself like this. It makes me feel like I'm being recruited into something I didn't sign up for. I reached for his hand. I can handle her. I'll set boundaries. He pulled back gently. I believe you. I just don't believe she'll stop. That's what broke me. Not because he was wrong, because he was right. He left with an apology and a hug that felt like closure. Micro hook. That night, I didn't cry because I missed Ethan. I cried because I realized my mother would keep doing this until I made it stop. The next week, I went down a rabbit hole. Articles, podcasts, those late-night videos where therapists talk calmly about parents who compete with their children. Everything felt uncomfortably familiar. Narcissism, enmeshment, emotional incest, words that made me want to throw my phone across the room because naming it made it real. Meanwhile, my mom acted like nothing happened. She called me, cheerful as ever. You coming over Sunday? I'm making chicken piccata. I gripped my phone. Stop texting people I date. Silence. Then, oh my God, Ethan told you. So you admit it. I was being supportive, she said, voice turning sugary. He seemed stressed. You texted him at midnight. I couldn't sleep, she snapped. Not everything is about you, Lila. I actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. That's funny coming from you. Her tone sharpened instantly. Excuse me? I hung up before she could launch into the usual script. How she's the victim, how I'm ungrateful, how I always twist her intentions. I knew the lines. I could mouth them with her. Then I did something I'd never done before. I asked for help. Not therapy. Yet, I wasn't there. I asked my friend Mateo. Mateo was my coworker turned best friend. 30, stylish, ridiculously charismatic, and openly gay in a way that made people feel comfortable instead of defensive. He had a long-term boyfriend named Shane, and they were that annoying couple who actually liked each other. I cornered him in the break room after lunch. I need to ask you something insane, I said. Mateo sipped his iced coffee like he lived for insanity. Go. I need a fake boyfriend. He blinked once. Like, for tax purposes or for revenge purposes? Yes, I said, dead serious. Revenge, mostly. Mateo leaned against the counter. Okay, start talking. So I told him everything. The flirting, the sabotage, Ethan, the messages. By the time I finished, my voice was shaking with anger. Mateo's face went still in that way it does when someone stops joking. Lila, he said quietly, your mom is not just a lot. Your mom is hunting. That word hit me like cold water. Hunting, I repeated. He nodded. She's not trying to be friendly. She's trying to prove she can take what's yours. I swallowed. So, will you help me? Mateo stared at me for a long second, then smiled like a villain in a movie. Oh, he said, absolutely. Let's set a trap. Mateo didn't treat my request like a joke, which was the first time anyone in my life had taken my mom seriously without making me feel dramatic. We met that night at a quiet bar near Short North. He slid into the booth like he was arriving on a red carpet, wearing a fitted black jacket and the kind of smile that made strangers want to confess their secrets. "Ground rules," he said, tapping the table once. "I'm not kissing you. I'm not letting her touch me. And if she says something gross, I'm going to enjoy myself." I nodded. Perfect. He lifted a brow. "Also, Shane wants to know if he should be offended." "Tell Shane he's the reason this works," I said, "because if she tries to win you, she's literally competing with a man she's never met." Mateo grinned. "Now that is art." We mapped it out like a heist. The objective wasn't to humiliate my mother for sport, though I wasn't going to pretend that didn't appeal to me. The objective was to expose the pattern in a way she couldn't spin. We'd show up to Sunday dinner. Mateo would be charming but controlled. If my mom pushed boundaries, he'd redirect politely and keep it public. And if she tried the classic move, private messaging, little emotional wedges, we'd collect receipts. Microhook. I wasn't trying to trap my mother. I was giving her a chance to behave and betting she couldn't. Sunday came and I felt like I was walking into court. My mom opened the door wearing lipstick that was a little too bright for early afternoon. She froze for half a second when she saw Mateo, like her brain was recalculating the competition. Then the smile snapped into place. "Lila," she sang, "and you must be..." Mateo stepped forward with that effortless confidence that makes some people feel safe and other people feel threatened. "Mateo," he said warmly, "it's really nice to meet you." My mom held his handshake a beat too long. Of course she did. But Mateo gently pulled away like he'd done it 1,000 times without looking rude. Inside, she turned on the performance. Compliments, laughs, the whole cool mom act. But I saw the tells, the way she kept angling her body toward him, the way she asked questions that weren't about me at all. She served dinner and watched him eat like she was waiting to see what kind of man he was by how he held a fork. Mateo kept it light. Funny stories, harmless details, nothing she could weaponize later. And then she tried, not loud, not obvious. Just a quiet little jab aimed right at my ribs. She looked at Mateo and said, "You seem very put together. Lila tends to get overwhelmed. She's always been sensitive." My chest tightened. There it was. My mom's favorite trick. Compliment the man while subtly framing me as the weak link. Mateo didn't even blink. He smiled and said, "Sensitive people usually notice things other people miss. I like that about her." My mom's smile held, but her eyes didn't. It was like watching someone taste something sour and pretend it was fine. Microhook. She couldn't win in public, so she did what she always does. She changed the battlefield. After dinner, my mom insisted on giving Mateo a tour of her garden out back. January in Ohio, which meant the garden was basically dead sticks and optimism. But okay. I stayed inside and rinsed dishes, mostly because I didn't trust myself not to hover. I listened through the window, catching pieces of their conversation. My mom's laugh, Mateo's polite tone, the wind against the glass. 3 minutes later, Mateo walked back in alone. His expression was controlled, but his eyes had that sparkle people get when they've just confirmed a suspicion. "She just tried to get my number," he said quietly. My stomach dropped even though I'd expected it. "What did you say?" "I told her you already have it," he said. "She said she didn't want to bother you and wanted to check in with me directly." I exhaled through my nose. "Of course she did." Mateo leaned closer. "And then she asked if I'm the jealous type." I stared at him. "She is unbelievable." He gave a small shrug. "She's predictable." That night, I drove home with my hands clenched so tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles went pale. I kept replaying her garden maneuver in my head. It wasn't even the boldness that shocked me. It was the ease. Like she'd been doing this so long, it felt normal. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. A follow request from my mom on Instagram for Mateo. And because my mother has no sense of subtlety, she'd already liked his most recent photo. Mateo texted me a screenshot and one line. "She's speedrunning this, huh?" I typed back, "Don't accept, don't block, just wait." because this was the part where she always slipped. She couldn't resist the private lane. Microhook. The next message she sent him wasn't flirtation. It was a test, one designed to make him doubt me. She wrote him late that night. Mateo forwarded it to me immediately. No commentary, just receipts. It was the same template she'd used with Ethan. Praise, concern, insinuation. A soft accusation wrapped in care. I didn't respond. I didn't call her. I didn't give her the satisfaction of immediate drama. Instead, I made a folder on my laptop called Marianne, and I saved everything because I knew what was coming next. It came fast. The next morning, my aunt, my mom's older sister, texted me. "Your mom says you've been really stressed lately. Are you okay?" Then my cousin asked if everything was stable with my job. Then a family friend messaged me out of nowhere, asking if I was seeing someone safe. My stomach churned as the pattern snapped into focus. My mom wasn't just flirting with Mateo. She was already laying groundwork, painting me as unstable so any boundary I set would look like proof. That afternoon, my mom called me, voice sweet like nothing was wrong. "Hi, honey," she said. "Do you have a minute?" I stared at the name on my screen and felt this calm settle over me, the kind that only shows up when you're done being surprised. "What are you telling people?" I asked. A pause, a tiny inhale, then, "Excuse me?" "I'm getting texts," I said. "Concerned texts, about me, about my job, about my stress." "So what are you doing?" She sighed like I was exhausting. "I'm being a mother. People worry." "People didn't worry until you made them." Her tone sharpened, the sweetness cracking. "I'm not doing this over the phone. You and I need to sit down like adults." There it was. The demand for a talk, which in my mother's language meant, I get to lecture you, control the narrative, and then tell everyone you apologized. "I agree," I said, surprising even myself with how steady I sounded. "Let's sit down." Her voice softened instantly like she could taste victory. "Good. Come over tomorrow evening, just you and me." "No," I said, "not just you and me." Silence. I kept going. "We're doing it with witnesses." "What?" she snapped. "With Mateo," I said. "And Shane." A beat. "Why on earth would his—" "Because this involves him," I cut in. "And because I'm done with private conversations where you rewrite reality afterward." Microhook. She didn't yell right away. She did something worse. She tried to sound calm while her rage leaked through every word. "You're making this into a spectacle," she said slowly. "That's not healthy." I almost laughed. "Neither is messaging my boyfriend at midnight." "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed. "After everything I've done for you." "Tomorrow," I said. 7 o'clock, my place." She hung up on me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was about to crumble. I felt ready. Mateo came over that night with Shane, and the contrast between them made me weirdly emotional. They were comfortable, solid, no games, no hidden motives, just two people on the same team. We sat on my couch and laid out the plan for the sit-down. Mateo was calm, almost clinical. "She's going to cry," he said. "She's going to say you're attacking her. She's going to try to make me feel like I'm saving you from yourself." Shane nodded once. "And when she realizes she can't charm her way out, she'll smear you." I swallowed. "She already started." Mateo leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then we finish it clean. We tell the truth. We don't argue about her feelings. We stick to actions." My phone buzzed again, another message from a relative I hadn't talked to in months, asking if I was doing okay. I stared at it and felt my jaw tighten. Tomorrow wasn't just a conversation. Tomorrow was the moment I stopped letting my mother audition men in my life like she owned the casting call. And if she wanted a spectacle? Fine. I was done whispering. My mom arrived at 7:02, which was her way of reminding me she controlled the tempo. She stood in my doorway in a wool coat and glossy hair, scanning my apartment like she was judging a rental listing. When she noticed Mateo and Shane sitting on my couch, calm, polite, clearly not intimidated, something small and mean flashed across her face. Then she smiled. She didn't sit right away. She wandered, touched a picture frame like it was dusty, and finally perched on the edge of my armchair. She crossed her legs slowly, like she was settling in for an interview where she expected to win. I kept my hands on my knees so she wouldn't see them shake. Microhook. The hardest part wasn't confronting her. It was watching her prepare to rewrite reality before I even spoke. I started with the simplest sentence I could manage. I needed her to stop contacting the people I dated. She laughed softly and looked at Mateo like he was on her side. She gets these ideas and then spirals, she said, voice warm with fake concern. I'm just trying to help her keep a good thing when she finally has one. Mateo didn't bite. He didn't argue. He just stared at her with the kind of patience that makes manipulators itch. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the coffee table. Not hidden, not sneaky, visible. A quiet signal that I was done doing this in the dark. My mom's gaze flicked to it. Are you recording me? She asked, offended. I'm protecting myself, I said, because you keep telling people stories about me that don't match what actually happens. Her expression tightened, but she recovered fast. So now you're accusing me of lying. I didn't answer that. I opened the folder on my laptop instead and turned the screen slightly so everyone could see. Screenshots, timestamps, her follow requests, her late-night messages to Ethan, the message she'd sent Mateo, and the best part, her concerned little notes that sounded sweet until you read them as insinuations. My mom leaned forward, eyes narrowing. This is insane. It's your words, I said, your timestamps. Microhook. She couldn't deny the receipts, so she tried to make the receipts look like a symptom. She pushed back in her chair and let out a shaky breath, like she was summoning tears on command. I can't believe my own daughter is doing this to me, she whispered, loud enough to sound wounded but not loud enough to sound hysterical. After everything I sacrificed. That line used to freeze me. It used to make me backpedal, apologize, smooth things over. But sitting there with evidence and witnesses, it sounded like what it was, a diversion. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. You did this with Noah. You did it with Ethan. You're doing it again. She snapped her head toward Mateo. And you, what did she tell you? That I'm some villain? Mateo finally spoke, calm and deadly polite. Dialogue moment number 1. Marianne, he said, I'm not her boyfriend. He nodded toward Shane. He is. The room went silent in a way that felt physical. My mom blinked like her brain had hit an error message. Then she laughed once, sharp, not amused. Oh my God, so this is a setup. It's a truth, I said. You wanted access to him. You tried to get it, and you didn't care how it affected me. Her cheeks flushed. You tricked me. I gave you a chance to act normal, I said. You couldn't. Microhook. That's when she exploded, because shame is the one thing she can't wear like makeup. She shot up from the chair. This is disgusting, she spat. You're humiliating me in my own... She caught herself, realizing she was in my apartment, not hers. You're humiliating me in front of strangers. Mateo isn't a stranger, I said. He's my friend. You'd know that if you cared about my life instead of auditioning for it. Her eyes went wet. Instant, perfect tears. She pointed at me like I'd slapped her. You've always been jealous of me? There it was, the core confession wrapped in accusation. I stood too. My legs felt like rubber, but I stood anyway. I'm not jealous, I said. I'm exhausted. You treat my relationships like a competition, and I'm done letting you sabotage them. For a second, she looked genuinely stunned, like no one had ever said the quiet part out loud. Then she did what she always does when she's cornered. She grabbed her purse and reached for the exit, already building the story she'd tell on the way to her car. At the door, she turned back, voice trembling, eyes shining. I hope you're happy, she said. One day you'll realize you destroyed your own family. She left before I could respond. The door clicked shut, and my whole body sagged like a puppet with cut strings. Microhook. I thought the hardest part was over. It wasn't. The hardest part was what she did after she lost. Within 24 hours, she launched her smear campaign like she'd been waiting with a finger over a button. First, my aunt called to check on me, which is code for, your mom already called me and I'm trying to figure out which version of reality I'm supposed to believe. Then came the Facebook posts, vague, dramatic, dripping with martyr energy. It's heartbreaking when your own child turns cruel. Some people don't appreciate a mother's love. No names, but everyone knew. Then somehow it bled into my work. My supervisor asked if everything was okay at home because a concerned family member had messaged the company page about me being unstable. I sat in that office, cheeks burning, and realized my mom wasn't just trying to punish me socially. She was trying to destabilize my life so I'd come crawling back. I didn't. I sent my supervisor a calm email with screenshots, a short explanation, and one sentence. I'm handling a family boundary issue. It won't affect my performance. My supervisor didn't look thrilled, but he looked convinced. Then I started doing something that felt terrifying. I told the truth plainly without embellishment. When relatives asked, I didn't rant. I didn't trauma dump. I said, she repeatedly contacted my partners and implied things about me. I have receipts. I'm not discussing it further. Micro hook. The weird thing about liars is they rely on your silence more than they rely on their story. My mom's version had holes, big ones. In her story, Mateo was my boyfriend who turned out to be gay, as if that was some twist I'd discovered mid-dinner. In reality, Shane had been around for years, and a few people in our orbit knew that. She also claimed I'd trapped her by editing messages, which was funny, considering timestamps exist and multiple people had seen them. Slowly, the questions started. Not everyone questioned her. Some people will always choose the loudest victim, but a few family members messaged me privately. Did she really text Ethan at midnight? Did she really contact your boss? Why would she do that? I didn't celebrate, I didn't dunk on her. I just answered with the calm facts and let the contradiction do the work. A month later, my mom tried to reconcile. She sent me a long text about forgiveness and how families should stick together. There was no apology, just a request that I move on. I didn't respond. Micro hook. The biggest win wasn't getting people to believe me. It was realizing I didn't need everyone to. Time passed. My world got quieter, cleaner, not perfect, just less contaminated. And then I met Avery. Avery was confident in a way that didn't need to announce itself. He worked in HR, which meant he could smell manipulation like smoke. On our third date, I told him the whole thing, expecting the usual discomfort. Avery just nodded and said, "Okay, what boundaries do you want?" Not, "What did you do?" Not, "Maybe she didn't mean it." Not, "But she's your mom." Just boundaries. A few months later, we ran into my mom at a birthday dinner for my cousin. She arrived late, looked straight at Avery like she was taking inventory, and then tried that same old smile. She leaned in too close and said something sugary about how nice it was to finally meet the man who's been taking up all my daughter's time. Avery didn't flinch. Dialogue moment number 2. He smiled politely and said, "Nice to meet you, Marianne." Then, evenly, "Please don't speak about Lila like she's a resource you're losing." My mom's smile froze. The table went quiet. Someone cleared their throat. My mom's eyes flashed, searching for an angle. Tears, outrage, charm, anything. Nothing landed, because the difference now was simple. It wasn't just me holding the line anymore. It was my life, my friends, my partner, my spine. My mother looked away first, and I sat there, finally tasting what peace feels like when it isn't borrowed. Punchline. Turns out the only man she couldn't steal was the one who came with boundaries, and I kept those.